Welcome, and we'll start, of course, with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Here goes the screen share. And here we are. David, welcome. Good to see you. So I took the liberty of writing up the offerings that Aaron brought as opposed to the children of Israel, just so that you'd have, just some sense of reference here, right? These were the two offerings that Aaron brought. Both of them, the sin offering, we know the calf, significance. The ram as an olah. By the way, the ram, of course, represents Isaac. And the calf, incidentally, although it's not usually brought as a sin offering, represents Abraham. Remember, because it says El Habakar Ratz Avraham, that Abraham ran to get the calf to feed the three guests. And of course, we know the ram associated with Isaac, and of course, the lambs associated with Jacob. And as I said yesterday, the goat, referring to Joseph. Okay, but look at what the children of Israel bring. They bring the goat, the sin offering, a calf and a lamb, both as olot, an ox and a ram as shlamim. That's sort of a new offering that's introduced here. And what is mentioned also, of course, is the meal offering to be mixed, along with, to accompany these offerings up here. It's probably the shlamim, I'm going to guess, unless it was simply an independent offering. So just a little bit of review there. So here we go. Vaikhu et asher tziva Moshe. So now we're talking about Aaron and his sons. They took that which Moses had commanded, el pnei ohel moed, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, the tent of appointment. Vayikrevu kol ha'edah, and all the community drew close. Vayamdu lifnei Hashem, and they stood before Hashem. I don't think we have any Rashis until we get to Zion. So we'll keep going. Vayomer Moshe, Zeh hadavar, so Moses said, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem ta'asu, this that the Hashem has commanded, you shall do, vayera elechem, so that, I believe this vav here can be translated as so that, the presence of Hashem. Kvod, of course, we know means glory. It's translated so often as glory. That word connotes the presence of God. Of course, we also know that kavod means weightiness, things like that, heaviness, respect, things like that, gravitas, right? The antonym of kavod could be kadosh. In other words, if we wanted to get some fancy vocabulary, we could say that the word kavod connotes God's immanence, God's presence, and kadosh represents God's transcendence, otherness. Okay, so it's so interesting, right? Because we say kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvakot, maloch kol haaretz kavodo, right? So we put these two antonyms together. It's like saying thrice transcendent is Hashem, yet the fullness of the earth, maloch kol haaretz, the fullness of the earth is his presence, shows his presence. Right, okay, so that the presence of Hashem.
Very loud. That ding is very loud.
When you say very loud, are you talking about?
There was a ding that was very loud.
Okay, all right. I'll turn off my messages. Although sometimes it'll happen even when I don't, when I don't have it on. But I did have it on, so I'll turn it off. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you were talking about the
in messages.
Yes.
Go into preferences, and all you have to do is click the sound off. All your messages still come in, and you can see them on your screen.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to, if it's okay, I won't do it now. Hopefully we won't get any more. So just to keep going here, so that the presence of Hashem, your God, will appear. Vayera, from Ra'ah, to see. You'll see. So there's a connection between doing what God commands, and it's certainly the specifics of this case here, and God, the divine presence appearing. Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, Moses then said, in addition, Moses said to Aaron, Krav el HaMizbeach, draw close to the altar, Va'aseh et chatatcha, and perform your sin offering, Ve'et olatecha, and your olah, Ve'chaper ba'adcha, and atone for yourself, Uva'ad ha'am, and on behalf of the people. So it's interesting. He is doing his sin offering, and the people are being atoned for at the same time. And I think there are possibly two ways to go about that. One is that remember that his chatat is the calf, and because of his involvement, his direct involvement with the creation of the golden calf. But of course, the people came to him and insisted that he do something. And so in that sense, they needed atonement as well. But because he was the one who was materially involved, he is the one who brings it. But this is why they are to be atoned for as well in this act on the part of Aaron. And the other piece that I feel is that Aaron does represent the people of Israel in his clothing and in his presence. He is the children of Israel. And so the degree to which, if I were to extrapolate further, the degree to which the essence of the nation is to be found in its highest leaders. They are the essence. So, va'aseh et korban ha'am, and perform the sacrifice of the people, v'chaper ba'adam, and atone for them. So there it is specifically. And this, I would say, korban ha'am would have to be the goat that we were talking about. Ka'asher tziva Hashem, just as Hashem has commanded. So this is not this particular Ka'asher tziva Hashem is, it's easy to sort of just overlook it. But I think that that's a very important thing. That's sort of a refrain in a way, trying to synthesize one's own behavior with divine will. Rashi. Krav el HaMizbeach, and this is from Torah Kohanim, from the Sifra. This is beautiful. Why did Moses have to tell Aaron to draw near? Why is this specified? Because he could have just said, perform your sin offering. He didn't have to say specifically, where was Aaron else going to perform this sin offering? Somewhere else? In Timbuktu? I mean, obviously he was going to do it on the altar. So why do we have these words? Beautiful literary interpretation here. Shahaya Aharon Bosh. Aaron felt ashamed. Vayar lageshet, and he was afraid to draw close to the altar. I think it had to do with what he had done, and that's with the sin, with the golden calf, and he felt he was not worthy of such a thing. Amar lo Moshe, Moses said to him, Lama atabosh, why are you ashamed? Lachach nivcharta, it was for this that you were chosen. So I love the fact that that we have the specifics of that there's this imaginary speech that Moses is having, at least that we're trying to provide the words that Moses might have said to Aaron at this particular moment, and that's sort of hidden within the lines of the written Torah text. Et chatatcha, your sin offering, and he says, Egel ben Bakar, that of course was the calf of the herd, a yearling, I believe, calf, ve'et olatcha, and he says, I think Rashi is saying this to sort of fill it out, and that's of course the ram. And then korban ha'am, And as we mentioned ourselves, Se'ir Izim. So he says, but he goes beyond that. It's not just a single offering. It is the Se'ir Izim, that is the goat, um, the goat, the egel and the calf, the keves and the lamb. And he says, goes on to say, Kol makom she'nemar egel, wherever it says it refers simply to an egel, to a calf, ben shana, who it is going to be a yearling calf, umikan atalamed, and you learn out this principle from this particular passage in the Torah. We can take a look. Do you want me to pause for a moment and take any comments that you might have?
But this is like absolutely in one sense irrelevant, but in the other sense striking. Because the word ashame sounds a lot like ashamnu, and ashame definitely means to feel guilty.
Right.
But the roots really are separate as far as I can tell.
Yes.
But it's just such an amazing coincidence.
Right. Well, ashamnu, of course, means we are guilty.
That's right. And a shame, and the word shame is directly related to feelings of guilt.
Yes.
The definition.
It certainly is. Yes. It's sort of an interesting connection.
Or non-connection.
Coincidence. How's that? Let me see. Let me go into here. I think we have some possibly an interesting. Okay. This isn't until later, so we'll keep going. So we just were on Zion, and so we need to move on to the verse Chet. Vayikrav Aharon, Aaron drew near. He approached Elamizbeach. He approached the altar. Vayishchat et egel hachatat asher lo, and he slaughtered the calf of the sin offering of his, which was his. So just in terms of some of the visualization of what happened, is basically the animals were not slaughtered up on the altar. The holiest offerings, I believe, were slaughtered in the northern part of the courtyard. That was the place where they were slaughtered. And then, of course, the pieces of the animal then were taken up. What would happen is there was something called the blood work, where the blood would be poured into a basin, and then whatever else needed to be done to prepare the animal, to flay it and to remove the innards, etc., etc. All that work would be done down below, and then the specific parts that were to go up on the altar would be taken up. At any rate, here we go. I just want to make sure I'm covering whatever Rashis might appear, so I'm going to double check.
No Rashi till verse 11.
I see that. Vayikravu b'nei Aharon et hadam elav. Okay, and the sons of Aaron brought the blood to him. So they had obviously in a basin. Vayitbol etzba'o badam, and this would be Aaron. Litbol means, of course, to immerse his finger in the blood. Vayiten al karnot hamizbeach, and he placed it on the horns of the altar. So he would have taken it up and then placed it on the horns of the altar. The et hadam yatzak, and we're talking about the remaining blood in the basin. He poured out el yisod hamizbeach, at the base of the altar. There are a lot of details that are being left out of here if you're actually trying to visualize what he was doing. But I would imagine that the Yesod HaMizbeach might well be on the south side there by the Kevesh, by the ramp. The Et HaChelev, the fat, the Et HaKlayot, the kidneys, the Et HaYoteret Min HaKaved, that would they translate that as the lobe of the liver. Min hachatat, from the sin offering. hiktir hamizbecha. He caused to smoke on the altar. Kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe, just as the Hashem had commanded Moses. Remember, I told you this is like a refrain. The et habasar, and the meat, right, the flesh, the et haor, and the skin, saraf ba'esh. He burnt in fire, michutz lamachaneh, outside the encampment. So that did not go up on the altar. And this is usually, you should not think that a chatat was completely burnt, but this is the way it was treated for this particular sin offering, because this was his, Aaron, the high priest. Vayishchat et ha'olah, and he slaughtered the olah. Vayamtziu bnei Aharon elav et hadam, and again the sons of Aaron, they basically presented the blood to him. Vayizrakehu al hamizbeach saviv, and he threw that on the altar around. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it would be basically he dashed it against the walls of the altar 2 times. I believe the first time, I'm not, I don't necessarily remember. It was either on the north, it would be the northwest corner and the southeast corner. And by doing it on the corners, the blood would be on all 4 sides of the altar. So
Did you do the Rashi on 11?
No, not yet.
Okay.
So thank you. The et habasar, thank you, Lauren. I'm up in the Hebrew and I don't always see it up there. Okay. The et habasar ve'et haor. So the meat, the flesh, and the skin, etc. That remember we read how he burnt it outside the camp. Lo matzino. So Rashi points out that we don't find anywhere else chatat chitzonah, that a chatat, and when he says chatat chitzonah, he means a sin offering where the blood is not brought into the sanctuary. The blood, okay, if a high priest had to bring a sin offering, or the Sanhedrin had to bring a sin offering, part of the offering went, they had to take the blood and sprinkle it on the curtains of the tent of meeting. Because having your leaders, right, sin was a much more serious offense than if simply a regular person or even a king, although a king's sin offering was also a unique kind of offering, because obviously the king is a leader as well, but doesn't have the kedusha, the holiness of the high priest or the Sanhedrin. So chatat chitzonah means a sin offering where the blood is external. Chitzonah means external. It doesn't go into the tent of meeting itself. So we do not find an example of such a sin offering, nisrefet, that it should be completely burnt. Ella zu, except for this one. This is the only example that we have of a chatat whose blood is not brought into the inner sanctuary, that it's completely burnt. Veshel miluim, okay, elazu veshel miluim, and those that were brought, any chatat that was part of the miluim, the installation. Vechulan al pi hadibur, and this is a principle saying it's because God commanded it specifically. In other words, this isn't halacha, this isn't a general law, it is a specific, done specifically at God's command. That's the point of al pi hadibur. So we did do yud bet. I said yamtzihu, right? And I said presented. Lashon hoshata. So he says this has the connotation of stretching out, presenting, right? The hazmana would again be presentation or preparation, something to that effect. We'll go to Yud Gimel. Right. Ve'et ha'olah, and as for the whole offering, Himtziu elav lintacheha. They again presented, the sons of Aaron presented the olah to him, lintacheha, in its pieces. So it had been cut into pieces, the et harosh, together with the head, vayakter al hamizbeach, and he caused it to smoke on the altar.
Well, you said whole offering, but you meant burnt offering, or is it the same?
Same thing, same thing.
Okay.
That's why I actually prefer just calling it an olah and being done with it. But thanks for pointing that out. Yes, Lauren, they're synonymous.
Okay.
It means the whole offering is burnt. That's really what it's meaning. But olah, it's an interesting word, right? Sometimes it's translated as elevation offering, but I don't know. While that is probably a more accurate literal translation of the word olah, it's not all that helpful anyway. But what it probably means is that from the word oleh, to go up, the idea that the entire animal is offered up. And so the term whole offering in some ways is, it's not an easy word to translate with one word.
Okay, and one quick question.
Sure.
It's kind of a diversion, but it's related to olah, the word olah. And if it's too much of a diversion, don't deal with it right now. But when we say natilat yadayim,
Yes.
does that have, I know it has the connotation of lifting up, but is it at all a reference to an olah?
I don't see it that way. I do know it literally, it means taking, right?
Yeah, we say natilat
present
lulav as
your hand,
well.
something like
Yeah.
that. I'm saying that again.
And we say it with the lulav as well. You're right.
Yes, the taking and the presentation of the lulav. Yeah, taking is, I suppose, the best way of translating that, and it's fine. We're almost over today anyway. The idea of this particular hand washing with a bracha, this is connected. We connect our secular eating, right? That when we sit down to a meal, we consider the ability to have food, to produce food, to be able to digest food, to be able to enjoy food. I mean, let's be honest about it. Food production might be one of the most time-consuming activities of humanity. That more people are involved in that, more time is devoted to it than anything else. And it all sort of, I've been doing some work in terms of Birkat Hamazon. I read the overview to the book Birkat Hamazon from Art Scroll, and he does a great job of showing how it's connected to the manna, the idea of divine food, and the fact that even though food production is extremely complicated and it's very labor intensive, et cetera, nevertheless, that's sort of connected to the manna. And I know there's this famous statement that providing food for people to eat, for humans to consume, is more difficult for God, if anything's difficult for God, than than parting the Red Sea. So washing your hands before you eat bread is a way of purifying your hands. In Tractate Brachot, they discuss these issues of purity, of being ritually pure when you eat food, and washing your hands is the preparation of that. And it's a cleansing, it's a spiritual cleansing of your hands. And there's a lot of symbolism involved in that particular activity. So I'm going to stop the share right now. Let me just mark where we are. I believe we're at verse 14. So I'm going to put in the mark.
Rabbi?
Yes.
So I was going to speak on the same thing that Lauren did about Natilat Yadayim and Natilat Lulav, because
Yes.
it has struck me so much that it's the same verb, and that it isn't to clean your hands, and it
No.
isn't to shake the lulav. So it seemed to be to dedicate, raising our hands in service,
Yes.
or something like that, that it's the same verb. And So you said it's take our hands and take the lulav?
To present, yes. It does mean to take.
It's the present part that I think, it's like, do with me as you will, or may my hands do your work, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I probably need to take a look at Jastrow and see how he wants to translate that word. Really and truly, netilah seems to have the meaning of taking. But, beyond that, it has something, I think, what the feeling that I'm getting, this is more visceral than anything else, is that it has to do with paying attention to it, right? That of sort of doing something that draws attention to this particular act. So, that's
Well,
why
yes,
I'm
because
translating as presentation. I'm going to stop the share.
yeah, because what you do with the lulav once you take it is you shake it in all the directions, kind of visually demonstrating the presence of God all around.
Mhm.
And when you wash your hands, as you just said, you're connecting the feeding
Right,
to God's, feeding you and providing food for you.
right,
And
right,
even they use that word for, having an aliyah or going up to Israel. Both of those are connected with a supposed coming closer to God, as in when you give a sacrifice, it's also a direct relationship, of a movement towards God.
right. It is an elevation of some kind. It's a raising up, etc.
What's the shoresh?
Of what?
Netilat
Oh,
yadayim.
I believe it's Nun Tet Lamed.
Nun Tet Lamed, Mr. Klein, Professor Klein translates as to lift,
Okay,
to bear, or to take.
all right.
So lift, yeah.
Yeah, right. By the way, it just strikes me that people who engage in food fights, it's like as unappreciative, as disgusting a behavior as you could even imagine. That to engage in a food fight is
And
terrible.
wasteful.
Well, I mean, it's just a
And
whole
yes.
bunch of disgusting behavior. It's just, yeah. So
It's
let's
not
stop,
appreciative of what you've been
No.
given.
to say the least. I'm going to stop the recording. So thank those who have been following this recording, and with God's help, we'll meet tomorrow.